So hi everyone, and welcome, like I said, to Care Week, a week of free services from us, the Center for Relationships. I'm AJ. You might have seen me before in the other days. I'm the brand director, and today I'm excited to welcome you to ADHD and Couples, Tools to Help Your Relationship with our guest presenter, Heather Jackson. So for those who don't know about us, the Center for Relationships is a community counseling and outreach organization based in the Austin area. And we provide mental health resources through counseling and therapy for individuals, couples, families, and groups, and also by providing mental health education resources like the one that we have here today, collaborating with other forces in our community. This is our 8th annual Care Week, and it's our second year keeping Care Week fully virtual. We'd love to be able to reach people outside of our home base. So please, if you could, if you're willing to participate with us, just go in the chat box to the right and just let us know where you're joining us from. We always love to hear it. We get each new diverse group of people, and it feels like it's been getting more and more broad every day. So thanks so much for joining us from wherever you're from. And without further ado, I'd like to announce our facilitator and workshop leader. This workshop, ADHD and Couples, is led by Heather Jackson of Real Counseling. So Heather Jackson is a licensed marriage and family therapist associate based in the Austin, Texas area. She has expertise in working with couples and individuals on issues relating to depression, feelings of being disconnected from others or themselves, anxiety, loneliness, or sadness. Much of her work is related to addressing complex relationship problems in a way that's simple and easy to understand, to help members of a partnership lead back to themselves and to each other. Heather uses insight on what she's learned as a marriage and family therapist associate, wisdom gained from her avid reading of psychological literature, her personal experience with loved ones and family with ADHD, and her experience as a teacher and an educator to provide insight on this complex topic and how it can be addressed in a more manageable way for individuals, couples, and anyone you're connected to. So before we get started, I'm going to hand it over to Heather Jackson real quick. But first, we have just a little poll that we'd like you to participate in. This is one question, and we just want to ask you, what applies to you? Do you have a diagnosis of ADHD, or your partner does? Do you think that you might, or think you might be, exhibiting symptoms, or your partner may be exhibiting symptoms, or are you just here to learn with us? We'd love to know so that we can just target our presentation to you, make sure we're keeping you into consideration. Thanks everyone for filling out our poll. It's great to see so many people here. I hope we can give you some good, helpful tools. Great.
Yeah, this is great.
Beautiful. All right, so I'll give you guys just a couple more seconds to fill it out. I see 11 of us have participated, so the rest of you, if you can, please just participate with us so we can know where you're coming from. Thanks, guys.
This is really great.
So helpful. Perfect. All right, we got representation all across the board.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end us here. On that note, I'm going to go ahead and close our poll out here, and I'm going to share the results. So it looks like the majority of us actually have a partner who has a diagnosis of ADHD. And second most, 7 out of 18, they themselves have a diagnosis. Then next to that, about 4 people think their partner may have some symptoms, and 1 person thinks that they may have symptoms. And then 1 person is just here to learn with us. So yeah, thanks so much for joining us, guys. It's great to see that we have a lot of people that we can speak right to, and we're kind of representing the community here. People with the diagnosis and symptoms and concerns with us. So yeah, thanks so much. All right. At the end of that poll, now that we got all that away, I'm just gonna let Heather take it away. So Heather, take it away.
Thank you, AJ. Thanks so much. And thank you to everyone at the Center for Relationships for this opportunity to talk to you guys about a subject that's near and dear to my heart, and that is ADHD and couples, and trying to up our tool belt with things that can help when there might be ADHD involved in your relationship. I really appreciate you guys coming on here and filling out this poll right away, because there's going to be some information for all of you throughout this presentation. In the beginning, I'm going to be talking a little bit more about what is ADHD, some of the more current research on what it is. And so those of you who might be wondering, maybe I have it, maybe a person that I love might have it, these might be good pieces of data points for you in moving forward, and to take away and take back and continue to do more research on and see if that's really what's going on in your family, in your household, with your partner, or with yourself. And then also for those of you who have already gotten a diagnosis, or you have a partner who has a diagnosis, like, I'm so glad you're here. I think that what I want to start with before I get into my slides is just a little bit of background on me. I am a therapist, and one of the things that I really enjoy the most is working with couples who have ADHD as part of their dynamic. That comes from a couple of places in my history, from my past, that have helped inform my work, and it sparks a lot of energy for me, because it's a really important subject that I think gets overlooked. So just a little quick backstory. Way back before I had my own kids, and I was a teacher myself, and I used to teach in the special education department at a middle school in the Leander School District, for those of you who know that area. And I loved it. And that's a lot of hard work. And I would work a lot with, a lot of my kiddos had a diagnosis of ADHD. And so I would do a lot of work with them every day, helping to stay organized, time management, and all the things that come along with ADHD. And then what started to happen was I would come home, and I had just been married probably less than a year at that point, and I would come home and I would start to see some of the very same behaviors that I had seen during the day with my ADHD kiddos with my husband, who at the time was in his 30s and had not been diagnosed ever. And so through some working things out and complex discussions, we came to a point where he went in and actually got a really good assessment here in town and was diagnosed with ADHD. And I have to tell you guys, for me on a personal level, that was a huge aha moment in our relationship, because there were some things going on that I thought, these don't quite make sense. There's something that's like missing in our relationship. There's some communication stuff going on that I really am not quite sure where this is coming from. So fast forward to today, we ourselves as a couple have had to really work hard on pieces having to do with how ADHD affects our relationships. And I, as a therapist, really bring that into my work as well. And I love researching this topic because, again, it's personal for me. And also, I think it's such a source that if we can get some really good tools in our tool belt, it can be, we can look past some of these places where things can get really stuck in relationships if we can't figure out what's going on with, and once we figure out that it's ADHD and we can get some good skills together to, mitigate the symptoms, then we're all feeling a lot better. So I'm going to hold on one second, guys. I'm still seeing, AJ, is there any way you can pull down the poll? The poll and quizzes results. Sorry, guys, my cursor disappears.
Still on you, huh?
Oh, no, there it is. It's off now. I got it.
Okay, perfect.
I just couldn't see my screen. Okay.
Got it.
So also really quick throughout this talk, please use the chat, especially for those of you who find that if you have an idea, you need to have it put out right away on a piece of paper or something. Please use the chat. We will get back to those questions. So leave them there and rest assured that we will get to them so that you can bring your mind right back to the space and stay with us on the slides here. Okay, so first thing we need to go over is, what is ADHD? This is a hugely researched mental illness topic for many people. And so what I found is Dr. Russell Barkley, he has some really good ways of presenting ADHD. So I have his definition here. ADHD is the current term for a specific developmental disorder seen in both children and adults that is comprised of deficits in behavioral inhibition, sustained attention, and resistance to distraction. and the regulation of one's activity level to the demands of the situation, hyperactivity or restlessness. So what exactly does that mean? Well, when we think about the typical ADHD symptoms, impulse control is one of the big ones. That has to do with not being able to stop and think before acting. For example, this might turn in, it might present itself when, say, we're all playing a game and someone just cannot, you might have a kiddo who just cannot wait their turn. And they should developmentally, by the time they're, at whatever age they're at, they should be able to wait their turn and they just can't. This happens with couples a lot, blurting something out instead of waiting your turn to talk in conversations. Having to wait in line can be a huge struggle as part of that impulse control symptom of ADHD for some people. And also they can, when ADHD is involved, sometimes it's really easy to give up when actions don't immediately work for you. It's like, okay, this isn't working, moving on. And so there's like this drop of continuing to stick with something because it just seems like, there's something else more interesting going on. So I'm just going to move on to the next thing. So also another part of this is that there's this sense of like, I would rather opt in for the immediate reward versus wait for the longer term, maybe bigger reward. It's like that here and now, I want it now situation that can come up with that impulse control. And I'm trying to think, I think on this one, yeah. So these are just some more of these common symptoms here, okay? Excessive task, irrelevant activity, or activity that is poorly regulated to the demands of the situation. Okay, so that's pretty wordy, you guys. Basically what I mean by that is, ADHD can cause a lot of this fidgetiness on the go and need to always be doing something, tapping on something, tinkering around the house. In our house, for example, if we're ever on vacation, I may be able to sit and read a book on the beach and my husband is just going and he wants to be out sailing or he wants to be, going on a run. And it's that like internal motor that can't seem to slow down. Poor sustained attention or persistence of effort to tasks. So when asked to do boring or tedious or repetitive activities that lack some kind of intrinsic appeal, meaning you don't really feel like doing it, it just feels like a boring thing to do. ADHD can make it really hard for people to stick with it. And they fail to show a consistent level of persistence in some of the tasks that they're asked to do. So primary example of this is, doing the dishes. What could be more boring and repetitive than doing the dishes? Well, it is boring and repetitive. And what can happen is if there's some untreated ADHD going on, it's really extra hard to force someone who has ADHD on board to do the dishes. It's hard for them to force themselves to do it. And so it's like the dishes get half done or they don't get done at all, right? And that can cause issues. It can cause a lot of conflict in relationship. So, especially, another thing, I'm just looking over my notes to make sure I don't miss anything here. So often, people with ADHD report that they get easily bored with these tasks. And so they end up shifting from one uncompleted task to the next. So around the house, this could look like I'm going to start mowing the grass, but then this gets boring or something, you need more gas in the mower, but it's like, oh, that's too much work to go get that and then put the gas back in and then keep going on the mower. So I'm going to leave the mower and go on to, hanging pictures in the den or something like that. So it's really hard if a task gets interrupted to come back to it. Some more places that ADHD can really present itself is in working memory deficits. And working memory is your ability to use your brain to hold various pieces of information, take them in, hold them for a second or longer, integrate them and spit them back out for to solve a problem of one kind or another, to move through a task, for example. So again, this can be like, it can come out looking like forgetting to do things around the house, hard time holding information that would guide further thinking. It's easy to lose track of goals, and because there's little holding of information to say, oh yeah, I remember when there's no hindsight or foresight to say, I remember last time when it's like learning from your mistakes, right? When I left the dishes out, my wife got really pissed at me. So I'm going to try not to do that again this time and hope that that doesn't cause a fight, right? It's like that hindsight or foresight sometimes doesn't come into play because of those challenges with working memory. Okay. Trouble regulating emotions. Okay. So sometimes people will say, people with ADHD are just really big hotheads. It's just like anything they say comes, or anything they're feeling just comes out. And that is one of the symptoms of having ADHD, is having trouble with regulating emotions. And so we can have a person in our life that's giving us some feedback about something, and it might not even be bad feedback, but it just can come across feeling like this is being critical of me in some way, and the immediate reaction is to get upset about it. And there's not a lot of filtering before we go from 0 to 60. So those are just some other symptoms that are pretty common in ADHD. Again, the last one, diminished problem solving ability, ingenuity and flexibility in pursuing long-term goals. So again, that talks a little bit more about not being so flexible in getting long-term goals done, and a little bit more impulsive, thinking in terms of time being now and not now. So all of these kind of symptoms are parts of what comes into play when there is ADHD present. Okay, so here's what I want you guys to zero in on here. ADHD is a neurological challenge. It's a neurological disorder. People are literally able to do brain scans now and show that for folks who have ADHD, their frontal lobes are actually smaller. So that's the frontal lobe, is that this part of your brain. If anybody knows about Dan Siegel and Tina Bryson, they have this great hand model of the brain. So you can imagine that this top part of the brain is where this is the frontal lobes, and this is where we do all of our critical thinking, all of our calm, cool thinking. We can think about something and know if there's a consequence. We may decide to not do something, or it's like for the kid, like, if I don't want to fail this test, I better do my homework. That all happens up here in this prefrontal cortex. Okay, so when there's ADHD, this part is not working quite as well, and its connections to other parts of the brain are not functioning at 100%. So in thinking in terms of that brain is having more challenges doing what a normal neurotypical brain does when it comes to thinking things through, not being impulsive, regulating yourself, regulating your emotions. And so you can imagine that when that kind of a brain is trying to focus in a neurotypical world, that it can be extra challenging. It's early onset of major symptoms is one of the main things to look for if you're wondering if you have ADHD or someone you love has ADHD. Major symptoms are usually visible and come out usually in school, right? Between 3 to 6 years old, or at least before someone's 13 years old. Okay. And a couple things about these symptoms, right, that we just talked about, this challenge with impulse control or hyperactivity, excessive movement. All of these things, all of these behaviors are going to be, they're going to vary based on what situation a person is in. Okay, so for example, and those of you with ADHD, you know what I'm talking about. If you are in a hyper-focused mode and you're doing something that you really enjoy doing, those symptoms are not going to get in your way. Sometimes it's hard to transition out of what you're doing. But for example, if you're a 15-year-old and you really love playing video games, you're going to be zeroed in there and you're playing your video game and you can focus for hours because you are in the zone. You've been able to take off the distractions and be in that space. Okay. However, if the task is boring, like physics homework, right? That is going to, those symptoms are going to show up of ADHD, because again, it's about, you know, if you find it boring, then it's like, it's a situational, it can be really situational, and whether you're feeling those symptoms or not, which can be really hard when you're trying to suss out for people that you're living with. Why can't you just get this done? If you can, you know, focus up and, you know, be in your workshop for 5 hours at a time, putting things together, why can't you just get the dishes done, right? It's like this, this dynamic of not knowing what is, you know, feeling like in one moment, your person with ADHD can focus and no problem. And then in the next moment, they don't. And so what's that about, right? And we make up all kinds of stories about what that's about. So again, that's kind of talking about situational variation of symptoms, okay? Because if there's a payoff of some sort, if it feels like there's a reason to be doing this and it's immediate payoff, then it's a lot easier for that brain. Remember that neurological connecting brain, it's a more immediate payoff. So therefore it's more easy to stay focused on it. So think of the symptoms of ADHD more like a rainbow or a spectrum and less like a light switch. It's not you have it or you don't. ADHD is on a big spectrum, okay? So you've probably heard the phrase like, we're all a little ADHD. And what I would say to that is, yeah, it's a spectrum, right? There's people out there that are forgetful. There's people out there that have a hard time organizing their schedules. They're late to everything. You know, they have a hard time with their emotions. And what you have to look for is, and what we in the therapy world look for is, if the symptoms are becoming, if they're getting in the way of you being able to participate in your life to the fullest extent you can, they are literally, I'm having a hard time thinking of the word right now, but if they are, if they're keeping you from being fully present in your relationship, if they're having a detrimental impact on your work, on your life, on your relationships, then it's time to start looking into getting a diagnosis and to see whether that might be what's going on, is when those symptoms become so big that they take over. So let me just see, I think just a really quick note here. It's estimated that only 20 to 35% of children diagnosed with ADHD outgrow it. 2 to 5% of the adult population has ADHD. It exists in virtually every country where it has been investigated. Okay, so I want you to keep that in mind. So that was a lot of information I just threw at you guys. It's kind of rich, dense stuff. What I'd like to do real quick is check in on the chat. I'm seeing some people posting stuff up here. So because my cursor on my computer doesn't let me see it unless I go to this screen, I'm just going to go here real quick. Let's see. Give me a minute, guys. I'm going through the chat. And also, if any of you guys have any other questions, you want to add them now on the chat, feel free. I see someone here from LA. Thank you so much for being here. Let's see. Low frustration.
We also have someone from New Zealand.
Welcome. Welcome. That's so exciting. I'm so glad
Love
you're
to
here.
see it. So yeah, guys, let us know.
I was just seeing, so someone was asking about low frustration tolerance as a symptom. Yes, absolutely. So you can think of, you know, low frustration tolerance, meaning it's like, it's that much harder if it's a boring task, especially, right? It's like, it's that idea of, I can't do it, so I don't have the resources, or I don't have the working memory per se to stick with this and try some other angles on this similar problem. So I'm just going to give up, right? Let's see. And then I see there's some stuff about some different medications and people still feeling like they have symptoms. Yes, and the sensitivity rejection dysphoria. Yes, exactly. When people feel like, if you have someone in your life that has ADHD and it feels like they're walking around like an open wound. And this is a real thing, right? With ADHD. And it's like, all you have to do is you don't even mean to, but you hit on that open wound, and the reaction is so big, right? Because it literally feels like you're, stabbing a dagger into them, right? And this is a real thing. So I appreciate you guys bringing this up. Thank you for AJ for posting the hand model for everyone. Let me see. Yes, hyperfocus and losing track of time, having to set a timer. Exactly. Yes, yes. Okay. Yes. I'm just looking through, guys. Thanks for giving me a minute. Procrastination is so annoying. It is, isn't it? So I want to take a minute and talk about this, you guys, because someone brought up a really good point. So just want to pause for a minute about this idea of being on a medication and still having these symptoms. What I would tell you is this: yes, it would make sense to me that this is going to be, when you have ADHD, it is a pretty chronic mental challenge, so to speak. And so it's always kind of present with you. And when you take medication, that is absolutely one of the best things you can do to help yourself with ADHD. It's to find a psychiatrist who knows what they're talking about, find someone who understands the various types of medication for ADHD, and get yourself on something that works. But also know that there's going to need to be some counseling, behavioral checklists. It's more than just being on a medication in order to be able to live a really, the kind of life you want to live. Because what you need to be able to do is not just take the medication and think, okay, I'm healed now, but it's still this matter of learning how to keep myself on track, how to keep myself on time. And there's all kinds of behavioral things, like people have been mentioning. Timers are really helpful, whiteboards for writing down chores. There's all kinds of tricks of the trade, so to speak, in order to help manage the symptoms of ADHD. And while medication is one of them, there's lots of others. Okay, so I'm going to keep going here. So I want to get to the part that really is important to me that I want to talk about when it comes to ADHD, and that's ADHD in relationships or couples. Okay, there's a wonderful YouTuber out there, and she has ADHD, and she has a wonderful YouTube channel, and she refers to herself as an ADHD person as an ADHD brain. And that the partners with ADHD are the hearts, the people who love the people with ADHD. So I want to put that in there. And AJ, if you can find that and put that in the chat, it's the ADHD brain. And she does some wonderful, she has some wonderful talks, videos about how to handle various situations if you have ADHD or if your partner does. She's great. So I'm hoping AJ can put that in our chat.
I sure can. Can you tell me one more time what the name of the person is?
Oh, that is a good question. Does anyone else? I would look up ADHD brain, and I bet it'll come up. I'll try to find it in a minute. I'll make sure you guys have it before we end today, because it's a really great. She's really good. So, but here's some realities here, guys. This is the divorce rate is 3 times higher among adults with ADHD by their mid-40s. Some problems reported by couples where ADHD present are: doesn't remember being told things, says things without thinking, zones out during conversations, has trouble dealing with frustrations, has trouble getting started on a task, underestimates the time needed to complete a task, leaves a mess, doesn't finish household projects, doesn't respond when spoken to, and doesn't plan ahead. So I want to back up from that a minute and just look at, well, what does it mean to have a good, strong, satisfying relationship? Okay. In the marriage and family therapy world, we talk about this a lot. We talk about, what does it mean to get healthier relationships? What can we teach people? How can people better love on their partner, feel more comfortable, connected, real with themselves and with their partners? And John Gottman he's done a lot of research, and he talks about this acronym of ATTUNE. And that these are some basic building blocks for how to build trust with your partner. Okay, so I want to go through these real quick. And as we're going through these, I want you guys to be thinking about how some of the symptoms of ADHD may be getting in the way of these. Okay, so number one, awareness of your partner's emotion. Number two, turning toward the emotion. So what that might look like is, let's say we're having a conflict over parenting, for example, and one partner is feeling really sad about a decision that was made or really angry about a decision that was made. Is the other partner able to be aware and holds that their partner's emotion, turn toward that emotion? Are they able to then tolerate that there may be two different viewpoints here, right? There's my viewpoint, but then there's my partner's, and theirs is separate. And neither one may be right or wrong. Am I able to do that? Trying to understand your partner, right? Where are they coming from? What's it like to walk in their shoes? Having non-defensive responses to your partner. And then finally, responding with empathy. So, holding that, I want you to imagine what that looks like when ADHD symptoms get in the way of attuning with your partner, right? Sometimes there can be impulsiveness. So I'm trying to share what I'm feeling, and my partner immediately blurts out over top of me. I don't feel heard, right? Or I am having a difficulty, I'm trying to share something and my partner's over there scrolling on their phone, right? Because maybe they are feeling like, well, I can keep track of what you're saying and be on my phone because there's lots of things that I am distracted but equally paying attention to at the same time. That can feel really disconnecting, right? Interrupting, hyperactivity, forgetfulness, excessive emotional outbursts, distraction, lack of self-awareness, lack of self-restraint, a challenged working memory, not being able to remember, wait a minute, what did we talk about yesterday? Who is picking up the kids, right? Lack of emotional self-control and lack of time management, now and not now. So you can start to see how, you know, ADHD has its challenges in the work world, in the, you know, in the organization of space and time, but really in the way too of how we can connect and be with the people that we love without these symptoms getting in the way. So what you may not know is lurking within your loved one who has ADHD. These are just some things that I've compiled that are what I would call beneath the surface that may or may not be what your person who's in your life who has ADHD has been experiencing and may or may not be able to tell you, but are definitely there. Deep sense of shame, I am a failure. Continued feelings for their whole life of not adding up. It's never worked before, why should I try now? Feeling deeply, someone talked about this earlier, like walking around like an open wound. And just exhaustion from just trying to stay focused every moment of every day. It's like being in a loud concert. You know, in our house, we talk about how many screens, TV screens are up right now, right? My husband will say, I've got 5 screens going right now, you know? So you can imagine if you're the non-ADHD partner, what that must be like to have all of these screens and not being able to focus in on just one of them at a time, or having to work extra hard to focus in on what's right in front of you. Okay, so those are some things. I want to look in the chat. Does anyone here who is wanting to be brave tell us anything else about what your experience? Anyone here who's an ADHD brain, what are some things that you experience that your partner may or may not know, or that people may or may not know what it's like to be someone who has ADHD and trying to be in a relationship with someone else? Does anyone else have anything they want to add? And if not, that's okay too. This is being really brave here, guys. Distraction, yeah. It's hard just to start because it's so overwhelming. Time management. Thank you. Yeah. They get frustrated. Yes. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, the weird way time occurs. Yeah. Feeling disconnected at home because I use up all of my focus and energy at work. Yeah. Feeling lazy, like I'm not pulling my weight. That was okay. Yeah. Distraction. Projects start and never get finished. Struggle to concentrate. Forgetfulness. Yes. And while these seem, guys, like this, the thing that's so fascinating to, or it can seem to me like, oh, well, everyone's a little forgetful, or, everyone gets tired and, has their energy used up at work or whatever. But I don't think that we really take the time to honor the fact that these are really small pieces that make a huge difference when we're trying to be in a solid relationship with someone, with our partner, right? These can be things that over time can really start to feel exhausting for everyone. Yeah. Disconnect and exhaustion. Yes. Yes. Trouble understanding communication. Right. Right. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for adding all of this here. I'm going to go back to our slides. Thank you for those of you brains who were brave enough to share. Yeah. Trouble understanding what someone is asking or telling me. Yes. So then it feels like, and then there's, I'm going to just add on this, just this idea that like, yeah, you think you're getting the information and the person is, you think you're giving them the information and that they're understanding you, but then there's a disconnect somewhere. A word gets changed or, it's like, can you go to the store and get milk? Yes. They go to the store and then it comes back and you come back with like a carton of eggs instead, because somewhere along the way, the one piece of information got dropped and the eggs, oh my God. And I'm going to go home and I'm going to make an omelet for my loved one because that'll be amazing. And I know that I can show my love that way, right? Like these are the kinds of things that happen. So yes, thank you. These are some things. And if you are a heart and you didn't know these things, take a minute and really feel into that, you guys, on what it must be like to be walking around in your partner's shoes with their ADHD symptoms. And then I want to flip the script here. What you may not know is lurking within the heart of someone who lives with someone with ADHD, right? In the heart, right? I feel so lonely. Feeling like it was a bait and switch. Sometimes there's, and this makes sense with the symptoms of ADHD, it can feel like when it's a new relationship, when you're at the very beginning, you've got all those hormones flooding through you because it's a new relationship and it's love and it's amazing. And that hyper focus comes right online, right? But then, and so all you do is you're like enwrapped with each other. But then as time goes on and things start to settle in, there's other new, exciting, interesting things that, kind of come on board, right? As well as a lot of boring tasks of just the day-to-day living. And so ADHD symptoms, all of a sudden that hyper focus goes away. And, the person with ADHD starts to feel bored about having to do dishes, right? And so the person who is the partner of someone with ADHD can feel like, wait a minute, what happened? We used to talk all the time and now I can barely get your attention, right? My partner ignores me all the time now. And then we start to make up, they don't love me. That's a story we make up, right? My partner ignores me all the time. And so I make up, they don't love me. I can't trust this person and I thought I could. I asked them to go to the store and get milk and they came home with eggs, but we really need milk. I feel like a parent to my partner. This is a huge one. I feel like a parent to my partner. I don't know about you guys, but that's not so sexy, right? That's not a great place to be in for either partner. If I don't keep up with the schedule and getting things done, the wheels will fall off the train. And so some things start to set in like bad mindsets. He, she, they don't love me anymore. They never listen. It's all on me. I'm the parent. Yeah. What else can be added to this list if you are someone who has a partner who has ADHD? What else What else? Feeling like I have to carry the mental burden. Thank you. Yeah. Feeling, oh, and I see somebody feeling like a disappointment and a bad person. Time blindness. Yeah. You guys are being really brave, and I really want to honor and just take a minute to really honor what everyone's sharing here. This is a really sensitive subject, and I really want to acknowledge that in this space. Yeah, I have ADHD. I'm feeling like I'm not good enough. Yes. Resentment. Right. Right. Yeah, my partner feels he doesn't want to, puts himself out there when I'm not present. Yeah. Yeah. I want to learn because I love my partner. Yeah. Yeah. So when we've looked at this, I feel like I have to double check that everything we needed to get done is done. Wanting surprise dates or for partners to plan, but knowing that they may never, that may never happen. Yeah. Yeah, there's so much that we hold, isn't there, on both sides that can really get in the way of us getting the love, feeling the love and giving the love that we really do feel for each other, right? It can really get in the way. And while it seems like such a simple thing and such a common thing, oh, they have ADHD, it really is important to take the time, like we are now, guys, to honor the fact that this is no small thing. This is a daily symptomatic diagnosis that can really impact how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about our partners. And if we don't take the time to really figure out, okay, is this my partner or is this his ADHD? Then we stand the risk of just falling further and further apart, which is what leads me to my next slide here. Hold on. Sorry, I'm going to come back off the chat. Thank you, everyone, for those of you who've shared. All right. I guess I am. Okay. We fall away from each other. Okay. So we start to think, like, what the heck is going on? Symptoms of ADHD. And I want to be clear, guys, this is symptoms of ADHD. This is not the person who has the ADHD, and this is not the partner who doesn't have ADHD. These are the symptoms themselves of ADHD, and those are the things that keep getting in the way of an attuned relationship. And everyone is wondering what the heck is going on. If you have ADHD, you might be like, why is my partner being so controlling? And then, if you're the partner, why are they acting so childish? And everyone feels so alone and like they're a failure. Okay. Sometimes we can go into therapy too. And I do want to just point this out. Sometimes we as therapists, we want the best for our clients. We're doing so much work to try to figure out what the heck is going on. It's important to acknowledge if ADHD is there in the room, and that could be part of the third that's getting in the way of real, true connection. Okay. So even we can miss it sometimes. And again, the places that ADHD symptoms show up are, with parenting, finances can be a big one, including spending, sex, general stress, household management, jobs and careers are all fair game for ADHD to come in and disrupt. So, okay, this feels like a downer. Let's switch it around, people. Let's talk about what we can do here, okay? Because there's so much good news. There's so many amazing treatment opportunities out there for ADHD. There's so much research that's been done. And, I feel like there's so many groups too to join that can help you feel not alone in this. And so just to go over a couple of these things, when you are, what to do or where to start if you suspect ADHD is hijacking your relationship, get a good assessment, check in and see if ADHD is present. A lot of people find out that they may have ADHD when one of their kiddos is diagnosed. Back to that original part about ADHD is it's pretty much, a huge part of ADHD is that it's genetic and it's genetically passed down. It's a heritable trait. And so they've done a lot of studies on this. And in fact, even part of a good assessment is going to ask things like, is there some ADHD that may be running through your family, right? Even if your prior generations of parents, grandparents, maybe they didn't get a formal diagnosis, but Were some of their behaviors similar to what an ADHD diagnosis would have been for them, right? And this can help us know, oh yeah, this would make sense. This is what's going on. Another thing, research and read up all you can about what it means to have ADHD or partner with ADHD. Look into medication, counseling with someone who gets it. CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, is a great modality of therapy to look for when you're choosing a therapist. So if you go into psychology today, type in CBT or ADHD, right? When you're searching for a therapist, it's great pieces because that's a great approach to working with clients who have ADHD. Find outside resources. CHADD.org and ADDA.org are great places to start. So screenshot that, write it down. If you haven't already found those resources, they're a great place to start. Which time are we at right now? Oh, good, we're doing fine. Okay, so partners of people with ADHD, here is your to-do list, okay? First of all, I wanna read something that Russell Barkley wrote in his book about helping, if you have someone that you love who has ADHD, and helping cope for you and them. Disruptions of your life automatically create sacrifices you must make to stabilize the life of your loved one in some important way. But that can occur so often that you may believe there is no end in sight to the withdrawals being made from this emotional bank account. I want to validate you. If you are in a relationship with someone who has ADHD, especially if it's undiagnosed, it is really, really difficult. It's really hard. And it may not be that the person you're with doesn't love you. It's just that those symptoms continue to get in the way and they can make life really, really hard. So I want to validate you. Give yourself breaks. Find some time, set some time aside to refill your own cup so that you can try not to build up so much resentment about what's happening, okay, between you and your partner. Also check in frequently with your partner. If your partner is, prolifically blurting stuff out over top, sometimes you can say, when you just blurted out something about the kids, as I was sharing my fears about an upcoming presentation of work, I make up that you, okay? That takes the blame out of it. It also gives your partner who has ADHD a chance to hear what you were thinking explicitly and to be able to correct it before it turns into a resentment, okay? I make up that you don't care about me. And then you pause. And then your partner who has ADHD can say, that's not at all. I just couldn't, I had to get it out because I knew I'd forget it if I didn't say it right then and there. And then partner with ADHD, you have an opportunity when someone says, well, I'm making up this story, you can correct the story and you can validate a part of the story that is true, such as, yeah, I can see how that would be, yeah, if I blurt something out, it would make sense that you don't feel listened to. Absolutely, I can see that. And I'm really sorry, I didn't mean it that way, right? Person of someone who has ADHD, or partner of someone who has partner of people with ADHD, another thing to do is to try not to take it personally if you can help it. If there is some emotional disruptiveness happening, take a break, regulate yourself, reframe your mindset, okay? Try to keep in mind, is this the person I love or is this ADHD symptoms that are causing this to go on, right? See if you can keep that and discern that as you're going through any sort of arguments you may be having with your partner. Join in when you can. If you guys work together, you will figure out a lot more time schedules that work for you, time management that will work for you if you can work together on that. That's what I mean when I say join in. Find outside support and help groups just for groups, or help groups that are just for you, okay? And then grieve if you need to. It can be that we come into a relationship with someone and, we have one idea of what it's going to be like. And then, we all have our parts that are difficult and our parts that are not our pretty parts, our warts, right? And, so it can be hard when this is discovered that like, wow, this is really here and this is here to stay in my partner. And, So it may mean that I have to, take extra time every week to, put together the family schedule. And I really had hoped that at some point I would be able to leave that up to my partner. And I just can't do that yet, or we need to do it together, or I can't just take my hand off this particular, this particular task quite yet, right? Okay, and then partners with ADHD to-do list. I want to validate you too. It's so hard to be in a neurotypical world where it seems like everybody else has no problem moving flawlessly and transitioning from one activity to the next. They seem to be able to know just the right thing to say. It's like fitting the square peg into the round hole. And I want to acknowledge that it's so hard when you do not focus that way on the norm, right? That's not your normal MO. And so to be able to get up every morning and continue on, despite these extra challenges is really, like, my hat's off to you guys. And I want you to know that, the more there's understanding about how the symptoms show up for you, the more you can manage them instead of those symptoms managing you. You can manage them. Okay, so if they are really getting in the way of you and your loved one, my guess is that you really, if you are really, if you love your partner, you're wanting to do something to help the relationship be better. And so here are some opportunities to try to make it work, right? Medication is one of the most helpful parts of treatment. And research has shown that ADHD medications help either correct to compensate for neurological problems, correct or compensate for that's a typo, or compensate for the underlying neurological problems in ADHD, okay? Also, this idea of ADHD is an explanation for behavior, but not an excuse. So how do you want to integrate your diagnosis into your sense of self, okay? My husband talks about how this can be a real superpower, and my stepson also has ADHD, and they both talk about how they see problems from very different angles than your average bear, right? And they have a specific set of skill sets that they've had to learn over their lifetime in order to operate in our neurotypical world. And those are great resources for them, and also can be really strong Superman powers, right? That the rest of us don't have. So mindfulness, consider doing CBT therapy. Mindfulness is huge. There's so many great apps out, guys. Insight Timer is a great free one. And there's lots of others. The more we can be mindful of what's happening in our body, the more we are present, and the more we have to stay focused here instead of getting distracted outward. So doing a mindfulness exercise is great. Mindfulness is a little different than meditation. You can go and Google that and see what differences you find and see where that might fit in your life. Routine, find a calendar system that works, increase empathy skills, check in on emotions. What are you feeling? Do some self-assessment and sense of self, journaling, movement, timeouts. If you're not feeling like you're going to react well, take a timeout. That is totally okay. And then be able to come back, and then grieve if you need to. Some of this stuff can be a real pain in the neck to deal with. Okay, and then family and couple take-home strategies. Set up a weekly check-in date with each other. Just start with 10 to 15-minute check-ins, okay? Put it on your calendar and make it a time where there are no distractions, no kids, no phones, no screens, nothing. Just the two of you, okay? And start out with like neutral topics. You don't have to save the world. You don't have to, take on, big conflicts that you guys have been having for years and years. Don't do that. Just start with some time that you just can be present with each other. FaceTime, present with each other. Communication when feelings are coming up. Use a structured approach that involves taking turns talking and listening. This will help with any of that impulsivity. Okay, I really like Carvel Hendricks. He wrote a book about, his whole approach to therapy is called imago therapy. And he has this thing called couples dialogue, and it is an actual structured, it's almost like a script that you follow, and you take turns talking about how you're feeling about something that you or your partner did, or something that's come up. And because of the structure of it, it makes it easier to follow along for both the ADHD brains and the hearts that love them. Okay. So use something like that, or use a timer. Okay. Whatever you do, try to incorporate some sort of mirroring of each other's feelings, validating what you can, and then empathizing with your partner. Organizing spaces. There's so much information out there, you guys, on how to organize spaces. And I'm sure a lot of you in the chat could probably share more. But there's these ideas of like, you need to be able to organize spaces. You need to be able to organize time. Try to take breaks if you're feeling like you're getting burned out. And here's a great one, setting boundaries. Okay, so if you really need your partner, I go back to the dishes because it's such an easy one, and it's just such a common, it's the most boring chore of all time, am I right? So yeah, so anyway, let's say, okay, it's your turn to do the dishes. This is typical with me and my husband. Okay, honey, it's your turn to do the dishes tonight. And so he knows, and whereas I would want to get them all done immediately after the meal, he might wait until he's got his music going and he's had, you know, a cup of coffee or a tea or something, and they don't get all the way completed until 10 p.m. that night. Okay, it's really hard for me as the partner to just let him do it his own way. But I do a lot better when I can remember that he has his own approach that works for him to get the job done. And you know, and I don't have to get involved in that. The main thing is this isn't getting done, right? Set deadlines. Deadlines are really helpful. They help bring on a sense of urgency that otherwise may not be there. So if you have something that you have to get done around the house, set a deadline. With money, set limits, set a budget. I really encourage to look more into this because impulsive spending can get really out of control and be really harmful in a relationship. So if this is happening for you, take some time, speak to someone at your bank, I guess, or you know, a money manager or somebody that might be able to help you guys to set a budget and a limit so that it doesn't get too far along and the money is all gone. Okay. And then also parenting, you know, this would be a great thing to work on as well. And I don't have time. I'm looking at my time right now. We don't have too much more time to go into the strategies there. So I'm going to move on. Oh, good. And that's the end. Great. So this was a lot of info, guys. I do want to hear from you real quick. How was this for you? And there's some time, or AJ, do you want to talk a little bit? I don't know how much time we have for Q&A, but I am here if people wanted to for a couple minutes.
Sure.
Talk a
So
little
yeah,
bit more.
Of course, like Heather was saying, if you have any questions, this is the time to let us know. We're just gonna rush a little bit through this, and we're gonna go a few minutes over as well. So if you can stay for a question, feel free to. One person says, so validating. Thanks so much for that. And I'm gonna go into our Q&A box right now.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I can see, and I can see the Q&A too. And just real quick, if you do have to leave, I really just want to say thank you to all of you who came and participated today. I hope that everyone got at least a little something out of this. If nothing else, just to acknowledge that, yeah, this is a real thing. And if ADHD is present in your relationship, absolutely reach out and get the help you need, because it is a unique dynamic. And it's and you're worth it, and your partner's worth it to get the extra help you may need in one way or another. So thank you so much. Yeah. Okay. So how do we as partners handle the sometimes excessive emotional reactions of our ADHD partners? Okay, this is great. Think of regulation, okay? When you have someone with ADHD, when your partner who has ADHD is in that emotional outburst, you can imagine it's the same thing as the brain model with Dan Siegel. The prefrontal cortex is not online. There is little to no calm and clear thinking that's happening when we're so heated, we're so dysregulated. And this is true not just of people who have ADHD, but just all of us, right? When we're really, really pissed off about something, 9 times out of 10, we're not going to say anything effective or nice during that time. Okay, so how do we handle the excessive emotional reactions? Well, a couple things. First of all, I always recommend everybody learn in a calm moment when you're with your partner and you're not in the middle of a fight, you come up with a plan that says, hey, I know that sometimes things can get heated, and I just want to figure out a plan because I don't want it to go the way that it's always gone, because it goes on long. We stay in this fight and we yell at each other. So what about this? Let's make a plan. Next time there is some sort of emotional outburst happening and I feel like I'm not going to be able to stay present, I'm going to say I need to take a break and I'll be back in 5 minutes, or I need to cool down and then let's come back to this, right? So you make a plan ahead of time to allow both of you to settle it, to settle down and regulate, and then be able to come back together. Does that sound like, is that enough of an answer? I hope that's helpful. Yeah. Okay, and then I have another. As much as ADHD makes my life difficult, I also love some of the ways my brain works due to my ADHD. What do you see are some benefits that ADHD has in relationships? Oh, I'm so glad you asked this question. I want to acknowledge that there are some really fun parts that ADHD brings to relationships as well, right? It's not all doom and gloom. There's a real sense of creativity and spontaneity that comes when there's ADHD present, that can be a real lift in your relationship with it can be a lift for both of you. Being able to kind of, for some people, and I don't know, and I'd love to hear how other people feel about this. I think for me, one of the things that I really value is the sense of, because time with ADHD is very much both now and not now. And I tend to be someone who gets anxious and starts to think about what's going to happen, that my husband with his ADHD can come back to the now, right? And we can be present in now and not worry so much about the future stuff, right? And so there's a lot of instances that I can come to him and rely on him to help me stay more present in the now. And we just have a lot of fun together. I would also say that, there's a lot of, I find that people with ADHD, underneath all the symptoms, have some of the biggest hearts of people I've ever met, and are really, really loyal people. And so that's just a personal anecdote. There's no research in that. That's just been my experience. The resources. Yes, let's go back to that. Resources screen again. Let me see if I can get back to that. Thank you for asking that question. Is this the one you're looking for? Resources. Different strategies. So. Okay, cool. So someone's asking, what if we both have ADHD? Yes. So that is a really good question. And it is a lot of the same. And it's going to be that much more important to, I would say, find us. It's going to be thinking outside the box into what are the goals that you're trying to accomplish, and how can you set realistic stepping stones to get to that goal together. So for example, if it's something having to do with how do I keep track of time? We seem to always be late to everything. Okay, well, let's figure out let's research and figure out what is a good app on a phone that helps keep time of everything, or we keep everything on a similar calendar together. Those are just some of the things I would say. And also, just as far as, when conflict comes up or excessive emotional reactions, same thing applies. Take a break if you can and come back together. And acknowledge that, yeah, this happened. I'm sorry, my emotions got the best of me, and come back and try to resolve whatever was coming up. I don't know. I'm hoping that was helpful. Let's see. Trying to get my husband to regulate is difficult with parenting an ADHD child. Absolutely. Okay, so what would you recommend for resources to help? Yes. So it's really common, right, that because this thing kind of comes with a family, that you not only have a parent with ADHD, but you usually have a kiddo in your household who may also have ADHD, which can make things extra hectic at times. and extra fun, right? You never know what's coming. So I really appreciate this question about how to, if you have ADHD, how to then go about parenting a child who also has ADHD. So there's a couple of things I would recommend. First of all, I would recommend making sure that everyone has a diagnosis and everyone really has a working understanding of what is ADHD and how it's getting in the way of whatever's happening in the family dynamic. I can't, and I don't know from your question, like what specifically is going on for you guys, but I would just say in general, this is such a great opportunity if your husband is able to learn about how ADHD symptoms affect him and how that he may be able to help your son in ways that, or your child, sorry, I shouldn't say son, your kiddo who has ADHD, how they can start to see those same things in themselves and be able to work with those symptoms in a way that they manage them instead of the symptoms managing the kid or your husband. So that would be one thing. I think timeouts are especially effective in order to not get emotional outbursts. Family meetings are really good when everyone's calm, to be able to really suss out how people are, to have a time to talk about open feelings about, I'm feeling really sad about, Dad, the other night, I was really trying to talk to you about, something that's really exciting at school and it seemed like you weren't listening. And, to be able to be there and kind of help regulate that can be a helpful place to start. There's a lot more there, but I think that's what I want to say about that right now. And truly, therapy can be really helpful too. Family therapy can be really helpful in instances like that. So, okay.
Yeah. Thanks so much for your great questions, guys. That was really helpful. I'm sure people got a lot of insight from those specific questions.
Yeah.
And thanks so
Great.
much for joining us today as well. Heather, thank you for an amazing presentation and helping us out. This was a great, diverse group of people, and it was great to give all this insight. So thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
And
Thank
for your
you.
amazing